Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I'm so happy that you could join us today. I'm June Rawl, and on today's webinar, we're going to talk about mindfulness, what it is, what it's not, and why does it matter in the first place? During this time of social distancing and so many unknowns, these practices may be just what the doctor ordered. Our presenter, Jenna Moniz from Broward County, is going to share her takeaways on why mindfulness matters right now and how her district has made efforts to share these practices with all students, staff, and family. But before we begin, let's briefly go over some things to remember. Remember that if you have a question, you may type it into the Q&A option and hit the send button. Jenna's going to be asking you questions throughout the presentation, so feel free to be able to use this option and answer those questions that she's going to propose to you. All of your attendee microphones are muted and you will be in listen-only mode. Today's presentation is being recorded. It will be available for access within 48 hours on the IPDAY website. Keep in mind that the PowerPoint that's presented today is already downloaded for you. At this point, I really want to welcome Jenna Moniz and let her go ahead and take us through this webinar that I'm really looking forward to hearing about. Jenna?
Well, thanks so much, June. Appreciate the warm welcome and introduction, and good afternoon to all of our participants throughout the state from somewhat sunny South Florida. I know many of us are probably at the point in this physical distancing quarantine time where we're ready for something else. So I know many of us are, at home far more than we were before. So maybe we're feeling cooped up at home. For those of us who are able to get outside and take advantage of the outdoors, grateful to be able to do that as well. But yes, I am especially looking forward to our conversation today. For those of you who have attended webinars with me before, you know that whenever I have a chance to speak with you all about cognition and brain-based science and anything that affects the way that we think and feel and our state of mind and state of being and that of our students, that is definitely the realm where I am, I don't know if I would say most comfortable, but certainly very interested. So I'm excited today to have this conversation about mindfulness. And as I'm talking, the objectives are on the screen. We're going to talk a little bit about the definition of mindfulness. It's definitely a buzzword these days and a section in most of your bookstores that we used to walk by anyway. I'm not sure if the bookstores are considered an essential store right now or not. Most of my stuff I order online, as I'm sure a lot of you do as well. But talking about what mindfulness is, what it is not, some of the perceptions around mindfulness, and again, why it matters so much right now, especially in this time that days and weeks and months that are unprecedented for us anyway. If for those history teachers out there, the GED teachers that have talked about and taught about and discussed the early years in U.S. history and discussed the Spanish flu, I'm sure that you are drawing lots of similarities and differences with your students, or at least in your heads right now with what we're living through. But this topic of mindfulness has come to the forefront of so many of our minds right now because of the necessity. And I just look at the numbers right now of the participants that are here in this conversation, and part of me really is thinking that a lot of our coming together right now is more than just the fact that we have our computers, and IPDA is able to offer these webinars Wednesdays. One of the biggest things that I think that we will talk about at some point, if we're not already talking about now, are some of the factors that are less easy to quantify during these times. So obviously, many of us are tracking the numbers of cases and illnesses, whether it be where we live, in our communities, where our families live, etc. So we're looking at the numbers of people who are directly affected by the infection, the virus. But what's going to be harder to quantify are the numbers of people and families who are affected in an indirect, more secondary kind of way. For example, the fact that domestic violence has increased, the fact that marriages may or may not be called to question, just some of the ancillary kinds of statistics that are not as easy to quantify, but definitely connected to the fact that we are all quarantined and stuck in a lot of ways at home. And so I think about my students often, as I'm sure many of you out there are thinking about your students and the situations that they are living in right now. We're in Florida, no telling what your living situation is, but I think about folks that are in apartment buildings, and I think of New York, but it could be anywhere in America where you're literally confined in a small area of place with a lot of people. So it's pretty inevitable that tensions can and will rise. And the fact that, so many of you have come together here in this conversation too, I think one of the things that we don't talk about a lot yet is the fact that we are so missing the social connection. So yes, there's the pandemic, and yes, there's the worry of the what ifs and when are we going back, etc. But the lack of human connection is going to be a factor that that I think that we will at some point begin to quantify because of the impact of isolation, because what we know the impacts of isolation can be. But no doubt, wherever you sit right now, wherever you are right now, the simple facts that things have changed and shifted. Hopefully, those of you who are out there and listening on, are fortunate enough to still be employed and paid no matter what the circumstance is. But many of us have family members who are not so fortunate, whose businesses, whose jobs may be compromised. So even if it's not us directly, being indirectly worried about our loved ones. I go back to that connection. I think about my dad, who is isolated up north, and he's a very social person, as am I, and I just think about his routine, and while financially it's not a hit for him, the lack of human connection, I know is certainly doing a number on him. So, while it may not be me, I'm worried about him and my students. So, there are all of these layers to where our mind goes, because we don't know necessarily. I can't tell you that, everything will be fine. I can't guarantee to my students that, GED testing will commence soon and or before graduation ceremony, and, lots of unknowns. And all of that unknown and not knowing and just not having the sense of security that we thought we had before certainly plays a role on our state of well-being. And so it's important to take a look at. It's important to be mindful of. And so when you think about, stress, and when we consider ourselves and how we maneuver through the day and where stress tends to hit us, because typically we will feel physical symptoms at some point, and some of us may feel them strategically in certain places of their bodies. Some of us may be sitting in chairs in front of the computer, all day now. There may be tension in our shoulders. Some of us may feel the tension forming as headaches. Some of us, feel it more in our stomach, but oftentimes there are physical presentations of worry that, that adds up to stress. So inviting you all right now to, in your Q&A, share a little bit about where, if you do feel stress presenting in your body, where you feel those symptoms, where you may feel tension in your body. Is it in your shoulders? Is it in the form of headache? Where do you see stress forming in your bodies? Shoulders and head, okay. Shoulders, more shoulders, right? Neck and shoulders, headache, yep. Upper back, lots of shoulders, back. Stress is felt in the body in the areas of the shoulders at the bare neck. Yep, cold sores, absolutely. Neck and shoulders, lots of neck and shoulders.
There's a few jaws and foggy brains and
eyes, I see that, yeah. I mean, something that, I walked away going, I have made it this far without glasses, but I don't know if I'll make it out of this not needing glasses. And I see some comments in the chat as well. Lower back, not able to focus. Yep, jaw, yes. So this is, pretty consistent with what we know that stress can do to the body and physically show up. So, probably no new news to you about, what stress can do, consistent sustained stress can do to the body. So just, taking a look at the slide, it pretty much impacts every function of our bodies, from our brain, our joints and muscles, our immune system, our reproductive system, our gut, skin, right? And so, I focus on the gut, right? Because what a lot of people may or may not know is that the kinds of chemicals that are released with prolonged stress tend to collect in the area of your gut, and that's where the dangerous stress can be. That's what is connected to impacting the heart. Let's focus a little bit on the brain, because in the field, obviously, of education, cognition has to be a part of our conversation. And so, someone said, feeling foggy, in the mind, absolutely, for sure. So what's highlighted here in this slide points out the limbic system, and this is what is directly impacted in your brain with increased and sustained amounts of stress, right? And so these are the chemicals that are given off. Your body will pump off cortisol and adrenaline, and it interferes with your white blood cells reproduction, which are, your immunities. It negatively impacts your serotonin production, and of course, decreased sex hormones, no fun. And then, of course, your limbic system, your amygdala, and learning. So inhibiting of the synaptic firing, and for those of us in the classroom, synaptic firing, what synaptic firing is learning. It's making a connection. So when you learn something new, you experience synaptic firing. So neurons are literally connecting. Well, when you're experiencing sustained levels of stress, this just can't happen. So when you're in fear, fight or flight mode, these connections aren't physiologically able to happen, and short-term memory is impacted as well. So that would explain the fogginess. So digging a little bit deeper, and not to go too far into this, but if you look at that second level, so your beta brainwaves, typically when we are functioning in a regular day, when I say regular, I mean our high movement in and out, fast-paced days, and or right now where we are, a lot of us are experiencing levels of stress and worry. Your brain kicks into beta waves, which is what you see here. And it's okay for short periods of time when we need to problem solve and figure things out, but it's also important to not stay in that place for sustained periods of time. Alpha state is where we want to be in a more relaxed, outside in the learning environment, outside of your comfort zone. So just enough to be intrigued and interested and curious, but not experiencing high levels of stress. And those high levels of stress are what are characterized as within that beta, those beta waves, which is where many of us are resonating now. High beta, high stress, impacting our bodies, impacting us physically, impacting us cognitively. So we know this. We're aware of the fact that these are difficult times. These are tough times, maybe, but they're unsure times. We can say that much. Just not knowing. The fact alone that we just don't know means that there's a loss of control. And with the loss of perceived control, your mind will often experience stress because we're used to thinking that we have things figured out, that we have things planned, and we know the way that things are going to go. And when things are totally thrown off and we don't have that sense of control any longer, it's natural that we will experience high levels of stress. So what is mindfulness, and what does it have to do with all of this, and why is everybody into it now, and why is it a section in the bookstore, and what does it have to do with, right? And our definition of mindfulness is pretty clear, and really the gist of it is that it's paying attention, it's being in the moment, it's being aware. It's being aware of where you are right now in the present moment. Aware of your thoughts, aware of what you're feeling, aware of what's going on with your body, and aware of your environment. That's all. It's just being aware in the present moment. The thing is, most of us tend to not be in the moment most of the time. We are in our planning mode. We are thinking about what could have happened and should have happened and didn't happen, often projecting or worrying about the future, or in the past, thinking about what could have, should have been, oftentimes not in the present moment. And I see this and I experience it, and I am definitely a contributor to not being mindful most of the time. I know that because when I go for walks, I'm often looking at my phone, checking my phone. Sitting at home, checking my phone. Technology, right? Whether it be social media or news or whatever's coming up, looking at something that is distracting me from the present moment. So mindfulness mindfulness pulls us to the now. It pulls us out of the past and pulls us out of the future. It puts us right in the present moment. And so right now, with this opportunity for us to be pulled away from all of the fast-paced movement and all of the doing and things that have to be done, we have the opportunity to slow down and take inventory and check on ourselves and see how we're doing, and self-care. So that's the moment we're in right now. Mindfulness is just a place of being aware. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change anything. It just gets you in the place where you are aware. When you do find that moment of awareness, of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, because most of us tend not to be in that place of even being aware of what it is that we are experiencing. In other words, most of us are probably used to being stressed out. Most of us are probably used to functioning at a high pace in an environment where we've got to do a lot and perform, etc. So we're usually working in overdrive, that this may or may not be the first time that you're able to slow down and actually think about what you're thinking and think about what you're feeling, feel what you're feeling. For others of us, being away and having to pull together all kinds of preparations for our students, whether that be with online learning, etc., creating online pages. For some of us, this may have caused more stress for us. Either way, the point is that not just right now in a time of a pandemic and unprecedented times, but right now and going forward, this presents an opportunity to start a lifestyle that allows you to have that moment, that place, that space between your thoughts and your emotions. And only when you are aware of them can you do anything about them. So mindfulness is not, because oftentimes when people think of mindfulness, they think of someone meditating, legs crossed, fingers together, maybe even going and while breathing is a large part and probably the foundation of mindfulness, because when you're slowing down and in the moment, you focus on your breathing. The breathing helps to slow you down. It helps to regulate your body. But meditation in and of itself is not all of mindfulness. Again, mindfulness is being aware. Mindfulness is not religion. It's not just meditation. It's not judgment. And when we say it's not judgment, that means when you're aware of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, you don't judge them. You just become aware of it. So if you start to become aware of the thoughts that you're having, you will see, most of us will see that a lot of those thoughts are thoughts that aren't always kind to ourselves. I would catch myself saying all the time, oh, I'm such an idiot, I shouldn't have done that. It's just being aware of those thoughts, not judging them, not beating myself up about them, but just noticing that I had that thought. Because every thought connects with an emotion, and every emotion triggers another thought. And so it becomes a cycle of a thought connecting to an emotion, connecting to a new thought. So at some point when you pump the brakes and you're aware of what you're thinking and feeling from that place, you have more room. You have more room and more control over what you're thinking and you're feeling. It's not fixing anything. It's not hypnosis. It's not an emotional release, and it's not a quick fix. It's simply being aware in the moment. And so what happens is when you are stressed out and you are nervous and you are worried and you are not knowing and you are tense and you feel that pressure and tension in your shoulders or your back or your lower, wherever you're feeling that, when you are feeling stressed out or stress, your sympathetic system kicks into motion, right? So that's where all the cortisol and the adrenaline and all these chemicals are flowing through your body that really causes long-term damage internally through your organs. They even say after 10 years or so, your brain shrinks in size because of the chemicals. Because your sympathetic system is there for a reason, was there for a reason, and your brain was developed from the back to the front. We're talking evolution, millions of years. Our brain started off from the back, and over the years, evolved to the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, where your executive functioning comes in, and your critical thinking and your creativity and all of those kinds of more evolved thinking, literally physiologically are toward the front of your brain, evolved last. So when your sympathetic system kicks off, we needed it at one point to keep us safe in the wild. But the problem is now that sympathetic nervous system is still going. So it's not like there was one emergency, you escaped a tiger, and now you're safe and your body balances back out. Our bodies are constantly in that place of stress mode as if there was a tiger in front of us all the time. Your body doesn't know the difference whether it's a tiger or it's a pandemic. Fear is fear, stress is stress, worry is worry. It doesn't matter what it is that's inducing the worry. It does the same, has the same impact on your brain and on your body as if you were being confronted by a tiger every single day. So when you are in a place of quote unquote mindfulness, meaning you are aware in the present moment, and you slow down and you focus on your breathing because you're aware in the present moment and you are calming yourself, your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. And so you can think of your sympathetic system as kind of the gas pedal in your car, and the parasympathetic nervous system, right, para, as the brake. It's stopping the stress, meaning this is what helps to calm you. This is what slows your heart rate back down to normal, normalizes your blood pressure. Your heart pumps less blood, you're perspiring less, your adrenaline balances back out, cortisol levels lower, your sex hormones kick back into balance, and your immune system can function properly. In other words, homeostasis. So you're in a place where you are able to heal. Your cells are turning over, etc. And so different examples of mindfulness, right? Because, you know, we tend to think of that person cross-legged, meditating, and it can look like that, sure. But mindfulness can look like a lot of things, right? So again, mindful breathing, and that's focused breathing. Mindful eating. So this is the opposite of probably what I did and do, you know, oftentimes at work when I'm shoveling down something to eat quickly, or if you're in your car and you're rushing from one meeting to another, stopping to pick up food quickly on the way and not noticing what you're doing in the moment when you're eating. So if you are shoveling back food, then certainly you're not savoring it, and you're probably thinking about what's coming up next and what you've got to do next, looking at social media, looking at your phone and the emails coming through, etc. And a lot of us do this often. So mindful eating, again, is slowing down and being in the present moment, being aware of how food tastes while you chew it. Being aware of the smell of your food, being aware of what it feels like as it goes down, being aware of it. Some mindful movement, and that could be anything from, you know, some people, you often think of yoga, sure, tai chi, sure, it's any kind of movement that puts you in the moment. So golfing. For me, it's a jog, you know, taking a jog outside and being in the moment and being in the present moment while I move my body is mindful movement. These are all mindful practices. Listening intently in the moment, not thinking about the thing that you're going to say next, or thinking about the phone call that you have to make, or thinking about what's coming up. Listening mindfully in the moment, being in the present moment, and mindful expression. So that could be anything from journal writing to speaking, poetry, etc., and self-care, and various ways to self-care. There are tons of things that you can do to self-care. Everybody's different. For some, taking a nice bubble bath does it. For others, a nice walk. For others, hanging out with their pets. You know, puts them in a place of mindfulness, being in the moment. So curious, what are some of the things that you do that put you in the present moment? And if you can't think of anything, what might some of those things be that you could do to bring you into the present moment, to put you in a place of mindfulness in the here and now?
And Jenna, as the participants are thinking about this, there's some questions coming through in the chat.
Okay.
Reminder, use the Q&A. But here's a question. How about like saying you're sorry and all that? Is that part of like mindfulness?
So it's a good question. So you know, I'm sorry and forgiveness, right? So really, what you're getting at is forgiveness. Next week, when we get on and talk, we're going to talk about what mindfulness opens the door to. Because mindfulness, again, and I take our time with this because it's important to realize that mindfulness doesn't fix anything. It doesn't do anything or change anything. All mindfulness does is put you in the present moment so that you're aware of it. So you can't be aware of the fact that an apology might need to be made if you're not in a place, if you're not in the now, if you're not in the moment, if you're not being mindful. But it doesn't fix anything. So we're going to talk about forgiveness, actually. We're going to talk about where some of the practices come in, where the agency comes in, where some of the what you can do now that you're in the moment, and now that you're aware of things that are coming up and thoughts that are coming up and feelings that are coming up, now you might realize you need to do something about it. And that's where the agency comes in. And that's where the fields of positive psychology come in. And that's where the actual action comes in. But none of those things can happen if you're not mindful of them, if you're not aware that you need to say sorry. So we're going to talk more about some of the action about it next week. But just to quickly answer your question, June, forgiveness, so you know, is as much, if not more, about the person who feels like they need to apologize than it is the recipient, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's great. And also, what about listening? We have a participant that's writing about how listening is so important, and not to just speak up and reply right away, if at all. So how does that listening factor into mindfulness?
Hugely. And that's, that I could have written that myself, I guess I should say, in terms of stepping away before you respond. You cannot be in a place of true listening if you're not in the present moment. You can't listen if you're already thinking about what to respond. If you're thinking that, well, I already know that I'm right here, so I'm just going to respond even before I listen to the person. Listening is huge because it lends itself to empathy. It lends itself to connection. And it doesn't happen often. And I say that knowing that that's a huge statement, because we're educators, and I think that as educators we have so much room for growth when it comes to listening and listening to our students, because I think when we really mindfully listen, and not just to our students, to everyone, to our spouses. I particularly think about our students just because that's our profession. Listening lends itself to forgiveness. Listening lends itself to empathy. And otherwise, we tend to be functioning in a place of what we habitually do, which is based on the past, which is exactly what we were getting at. So, I see the comments in the chat about listening before you respond and stepping away. Yes, because what we'll see when we slow down and get into the moment is that, typically my behavior is just to go based on what I usually do. By the age of 35, 95% of what we do is based on habit, not necessarily on novelty. So if our habits are based on, and they often are based on, because our brain is set up, our brain is created, our brain functions to keep us safe. The function of the brain is to for the most part, is to make our body function and to keep us safe. Most of what our brain does, we're not even aware of. We don't have to think about our heart beating. We don't have to think about blood pumping. We don't have to think about making our lungs work. Our brain does that for us. We're not even aware of it. 95% of what it does without us being aware of. So this mindfulness allows us to become aware of what we're actually thinking. So I love what I see in the chat here, just to wrap up the piece about forgiveness, because forgiveness for many of us starts with forgiving ourselves, right? So being kind to ourselves. When we're mindful and aware of what our thought pattern is, you know, many of us will notice we beat ourselves up pretty good. We're probably our biggest critic. You know, how many of us have done a presentation or, you know, done anything, turned anything in, submitted something, and rather than looking at all of the positive feedback, we hone in on what we could have done better, on the mistakes that we made. So when you're in a place of mindfulness, it just means that you're aware, and then from there we can make decisions about, you know, how we maneuver, how we, you know, having control over some of those thoughts, which definitely has connections to what it does to our body and what we're feeling. Drawing, doodling, looking outside, yes. Walking, working out, bike riding, diary writing, writing poetry, yes. Beautiful. I decided stress was, yes. Well, this is interesting. I'm reading a comment in the chat about dancing around a fire pit. And we'll talk more about that next week, actually, because there is a lot that happens scientifically with music and with movement. And so we're going to talk about like what it does to, you know, what it does to the body, what releasing some of that energy does, and how it helps us to feel less stressed. But yes, turn that music on, dance like nobody's watching. Even, you know, I didn't think of all of the scientific connections that it had. You know, for me, music and dancing was just kind of always a part of our lifestyles, part of my, you know, our culture. But, you know, I talk to folks, and, you know, no news to, you know, you guys. I'm in Broward, and learning from and with the teachers and the mind body ambassadors at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and some of the tools that they learned from the Center for Mind Body Medicine. I never really strategically thought about dancing and movement as medicine, but when you really understand the science of what it does, you know, it makes me go, you know, you know, with, especially with this, you know, all this distancing and not having the gatherings and live music, what have you. Throwing yourself a house party at home, you know, with yourself, with your favorite DJ, your favorite music, is more than just enjoyment. You know, it certainly is medicine, and we'll talk about the science of it later on. But in the meantime, dance like nobody's watching. Absolutely. And so I just mentioned the Center for Mind Body Medicine, and they are a national organization, and they were called to duty in Broward County after our nation's horrific tragedy at Stoneman Douglas High School a couple of years ago. And that high school and a lot of the district has been working with their strategies and their skills. And I'll share with you in a moment what we created in Broward to help out during these times, help out during the pandemic for students and staff and families. And one of the things that the Center for Mind Body Medicine teaches is what they call soft belly breathing. It doesn't matter what you call it. This is the foundation of their skills that they teach. And their skills get into the agency, what you can do about it. So it's a step beyond mindfulness. Because again, mindfulness is just being in the present moment, being aware. And when you're aware, from there, it opens up the space for agency, and the kind of agency that lends itself to being kind, starting with being kind to yourself and being kind with yourself. And if there's a space where forgiveness needs to happen, yes, that forgiveness happens first with yourself. It's hard to empathize with anyone else or feel what anybody else is feeling if you can't relate to those feelings with and for yourself. So absolutely apply that kindness to yourself first. So the Center for Mind Body Medicine uses kind of a script for soft belly breathing that they call it. And really what it is just helping you to focus on, it's a focused intentional breathing. So you are focused literally on your inhale and on your exhale. And many of you have done meditation on your own or tried various practices. There are lots of apps out there free right now. The Calm app, even if you're on YouTube, you can find all kinds of resources where there are guided meditations. And I'm actually going to walk you through one of them quickly. And this is the Center for Mind Body Medicine's soft belly breathing. And what it does is to help your parasympathetic system kind of make space for it and calm your body. So it's calming your mind, it's calming your body. We know for sure that there's a definite connection between your thoughts and your emotions, your mind and your body. And so this is putting your mind in the place to focus on your breathing in a way that we know helps to calm your body. So let's try it together. So hopefully you're in a space where you can have a nice seat. And so I'm seated here and I'm planting my feet on the floor. And I am sitting up straight. It helps if your back is straight and your spine is straight, just to help with the ease of breathing and, the connection of your energy centers throughout your body. And so I invite you to either close your eyes or find a soft gaze in front of you. You don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to do anything funny with your hands. You don't have to do anything funny with your body. You can do this lying down. You can do it anywhere, really. But it helps if you're not thinking about your, thinking about a limb or your arm or something not being comfortable. So you just want to be comfortable is the point. So go ahead and get yourselves seated. Close your eyes or find a nice soft gaze. This soft belly breathing is both awareness and concentrative, and we focus on the breath and concentrate on the words soft belly. So take a deep breath and allow your eyes to close or find a soft gaze in front of you. Breathe deeply in your nose and out through your mouth. Imagine your belly is soft as you're breathing in through your nose. It sends calming signals to your brain. And then as you exhale, you can say belly, if that helps. And thoughts will come in and thoughts will go out, and that's fine. Just let them flow in and flow out. And return your awareness to your breath. So as you're breathing in, you can say to yourself, soft. And as you're breathing out, you can say belly. And again, that just is to help us to focus on the inhale and the exhale. So soft, inhale. Belly, exhale. And no matter how often your mind wanders, just keep bringing it back each time to your breath. And take 3 more soft breaths, inhales, belly exhales at your own pace. One more inhale. And exhale. All right, and you can bring your thoughts back into the room. For, somebody said I feel hypnotized. This is not hypnosis. It's just it's a focus on your breathing. And really the words soft and belly can be interchanged with anything. It doesn't matter what you're saying. The fact that the Center for Mind Body Medicine uses those words are to keep you focused on the inhale and the exhale. And then again, with the word soft, it's really just trying to send messages to your brain to help calm your body. So you can use anything. You could use any words that you want. Bone Noodle has a great video called Melt Flow. Nice. And they have another one called Bring It Down Flow. Cool. They're both excellent for preschoolers and older. Very nice. Thank you. So there are lots of apps out there that will do guided meditations for you, guided breathing for you. For some of us, if you just want to play music, instrumental music may work, classical music, anything that floats your boat, jazz. You know, and if that's if you're focusing on your breathing. But again, nothing wrong with turning on some nice tunes, whatever it is that you like to listen to, and boogieing either, because that burns off a lot of the stress, you know. And with the gyms closed, etc., the dancing can definitely be used as both, you know, mindfulness and stress relief and exercise as well. So this is a website that Broward County created. I was very fortunate to have been a part of building this website that is open to all students, staff, and family members of Broward. And what we've built in are resources around and for mindfulness and positive psychology. So there are pre-recorded videos and links to all kinds of apps that are free, and links to courses that you could even be taking right now. One example is a course that we use at our school for our GED students called The Science of Wellbeing. That is a Yale University free course in Coursera. It's an 8-week course. I was surprised, honestly, at how much my students really got into it and liked it. I took the course. It's very accessible. And this is more than mindfulness, these courses. These courses are about agency. Now that I'm aware of what I'm thinking and feeling, because mindfulness is just the door in. It's just the awareness. Now that I'm aware, what do I do with it from there? What do I do with all of this stuff? What do I do with all of these feelings? What do I do with all of these emotions? Where do I start with these thoughts that I can't stop? So these courses that are based on the science of well-being are some of the most popular courses ever taught at, it was the most popular course at Yale, most popular course at Harvard, at UPenn, at Stanford, and they are around positive psychology or the science of well-being. And probably because there's such high stress levels, not only at the Ivy League schools, but at most colleges, many of our students. So this is kind of like the next step. Now that I'm aware, now that I'm feeling these feelings right now in the moment, what do I do about them? How can I help myself? How can I help my family? How can I help my loved ones? I know that this is anxiety that I'm feeling. I know that this is depression. What do I do about it? So it gets into more of the agency and what you can do about it. But every single one of these courses and every single one of these practices, whether it be mindful movement, dancing, expression, they all will come back to your breathing. They all will come back to the foundation, which has to do with focus on breathing, because your breathing is what's going to regulate everything else. So everything that we talked about today, everything that has to do with your brain waves, everything that has to do with not being able to concentrate, not being able to remember, feeling knots in your back and your stomach, all of that can be impacted in a positive way when your parasympathetic system kicks in. And that is controlled through your breathing. So the breathing is going to be your starting point for all of it. So I invite you all to check out the website that we created. That's the URL right here. And I invite you all to continue to breathe. So it doesn't matter if it's soft belly breathing, it doesn't matter what technique that you're using, but that you are finding time and carving out space to focus on your breathing. And I know for a lot of us, especially if this is new to you, you might feel like that is a non-action. That if this was during the regular school year, school week, we wouldn't have time for this. To that, I would counter, well, now, especially now, let's make the time for it. Let's prioritize that. And I challenge us that when we get back to quote unquote normalcy and go back to our regular lifestyles, that this just becomes part of what we do, because the stress isn't going to go away. It's going to show up and it's just a part of life. Having to deal with life and maneuver through life. It's always going to be a factor of life, whether it's a pandemic or something else. This is an opportunity for us to really get control over the way that we react and the way that we respond. And that starts with awareness, and it starts with breathing. I threw the slide in here because it kind of is going to kick us off into our conversation next week about, well, what do I do about it now? Where can I go with this now? Ellen Langer is a professor from Harvard University, and look her up if you have a chance. Take a look at her quick video on CBS this morning. She was on with Gail King, and they shared about her experiment that they did with a group of older folks, and just how it plays into mindfulness over matter. Meaning this is going to really highlight for us just how powerful our thoughts are. But we can only do anything about them when we're aware of what those thoughts are. So I encourage all of us just to use this time this week, carve out some time each day. Doesn't matter where. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a couple of minutes, but just find some quiet space where you can sit and focus on your breathing. And become aware of what thoughts come in and what thoughts come out. Let them go. But be aware of the kinds of thoughts that you're having without judgment. And then from there is where we're able to do something about them, is where real agency comes in. So for right now, I just invite you all to sit and to breathe and be aware in the present moment. From there, we talk about some of the things that we can do, including forgiveness. To not only feel okay, because feeling okay, is okay, but a lot of us want to thrive. We want to thrive and feel good and live the good life and be happy. And what Dr. Langer proposes is we've got control over a lot of that. So we will talk more next week about Dr. Langer's study and how we can be active in the process of what we're thinking and how that connects to feelings and really how it becomes how we show up in life, and how we can have some control over that once and only once we're aware of what we're thinking and feeling.
Jenna,
so with that said, yes, June.
Jenna, there's an interesting question,
Okay.
and that you in Broward County are doing a lot within your curriculum and everything in infusing some of these things. But here's the question: why don't they teach that in our schools?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. In fact, just to give you a tiny bit of history, around how this was created. Really fast, the superintendent said, hey folks, let's pull together these resources as quickly as we can to serve our community, because this is the time that we're going to need it the most. But nowhere in that coming together and planning for this for right now, do we ever think that we want this to be just for right now? So in other words, we want this to become a part of what we do every day. Our superintendent has intentions of getting mindfulness into every school, meaning mindfulness practices, whether those look like a moment to arrive. We've had a lot of students share out that before they take a test, or after a fire drill, or after a code red, certainly they want just a moment to gather themselves. There are lots of schools that have resources. I know of schools that have things like Zen dens and meditation spots where kids can just take a moment out and sit and breathe. That goes for our students on the adult side as well. our students are, I'm preaching to the choir. Our students are probably, dealing with far more than we're aware of, even if they show up smiling. So to answer your question, June, I think the answer is it's coming. In different districts and different schools to some degree and different levels. I'll tell you that at the academy that we started for underagers, it's actually woven into the curriculum. So positive psychology is something that we teach as a part of the GED curriculum, the GED day, because we know that if we're stressed out and not in a place where we can make neural connections, and when you're stressed out, you can't make neural connections, then we're wasting our breath, we're wasting our time. So it's critical that we take care of health and well-being before we even approach academics, because if we don't, let's just say if we do take care of the well-being and the wellness and the state of being of our students, the academics will fall into place. I'll tell you this, and not to name the high school, but there's a high school that practices some of these tools, and there was one teacher who took this on very seriously and implemented it in all of her classes, and before they had tests, they would breathe and shake and dance and release stress. And her scores were the only scores that went up in the school. I'm talking AP scores. So it didn't take much. It didn't interfere with her curriculum, but she made space and time for it. And you could argue that it paid itself off in dividends through the academics as well. So rather than thinking of this as something else and something additional and something else that's on our plate, I think we need to really start thinking about this as this is the pregame. This is before you can teach. You've got to make sure that first and foremost we're okay. Because whatever we're feeling, is going to be felt in our classrooms. So taking care of ourselves and taking care of our, our entire communities. If we take care of our students, they take care of their kids. They, the trickle effect. So I think it's soon to come, June. I really do.
I think this is so great. And Jenna, you have received so many compliments on that.
Oh.
People are asking, when can we have more of this? So I want to bring to your attention to mark your calendars for March 20th, because Jenna's going to be back with us and she's going to do a segment on the permission to breathe. So really, this whole segment is about giving ourselves the permission to breathe. So I hope on May, I said March, sorry. May.
Yep, May. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is May. I'm getting these days all mixed up.
I know. I start off by saying, I don't even know if do we have weekends anymore?
Yeah, I know. May, yes, May 20th, same time. Before you leave us today, there's going to be 3 questions that are going to appear on your screen. Just take a few minutes to provide some feedback to see if you would like some future webinars pertaining to this subject, if you would recommend this to others, and if you could apply just even one thing that you've learned from this webinar. And we'll leave this up for about 30 seconds. And while you do that, I just want to thank all of you. We're all in this together, as people are saying a lot lately, but seriously, if there's anything you need from IPDAY, we're here for you. So please reach out to us, and thank you for your time and all that you're doing for your students, yourself, your families, and everyone. Jenna, thank you so much.
Thank you, June. Thank you all for participating with us today, and we hope that everyone stays well, and I'll see and talk to you all again on May 20th. Thank you all. Take care.